The alarm screamed at 5:30 a.m. and I dragged myself from bed. Another double shift at Memorial Hospital. My stomach already churned with hunger, but I'd grab breakfast from the cafeteria before my shift started. That was the plan, anyway. I rushed through the sliding doors at 6:45 a.m., 15 minutes early, as always. The cafeteria was closed. A handwritten sign read, "Staff kitchen closed for repairs all day." My heart sank. I had a granola bar in my locker, maybe some crackers. That would have to do. Supervisor Beth Martinez waited at the nurse's station with that familiar scowl. Her arms crossed tight over her clipboard like a shield. "We're short-staffed today," she announced to our small group. "I need everyone at 100%. No exceptions." I raised my hand. "The cafeteria's closed. Can I run to the corner store real quick before?" "Absolutely not." Her voice cut like a blade. "Shift starts in 10 minutes. You should have planned better." My mouth went dry. 18 hours stretched ahead like a desert. I swallowed hard and nodded. The granola bar would have to last. What choice did I have? By hour 3, my stomach growled so loud that Mrs. Benson in room 204 asked if I was okay. "Just hungry," I laughed, checking her IV. She frowned with concern. "When's your lunch break, honey?" "Soon," I lied, adjusting her blanket. The truth was, I had no idea. Beth controlled the schedule with an iron fist. She decided when we ate, when we rested, when we breathed. I found her at the medication cart. "Beth, when can I grab something to eat? That granola bar is long gone." She didn't look up from her inventory sheets. "We're swamped. Maybe later. It's been 3 hours. I'm getting shaky." Now she looked at me, eyes cold as winter. "Are you saying you can't do your job?" Heat flooded my cheeks. "No, Then stop complaining. Professional nurses don't whine about being hungry." My hands trembled as I reached for the next chart. Professional nurses also didn't work 18 hours without food, but I kept that thought to myself. The shift had barely started, and already I felt like I was drowning. Hour 5 brought a code blue. Mr. Rory collapsed in the hallway, and we worked frantically to stabilize him. Chest compressions, medications, electricity jolting through his body. 20 minutes later, his heart found its rhythm again. I slumped against the wall afterward, sweat pouring down my face. My hands shook from adrenaline and hunger. The vending machine across the hall mocked me with its bright display of snacks. "Great job in there," Beth said, appearing beside me. For a second, I thought she might actually show some human decency. "Thanks. Listen, I really need to grab something. Mr. Rodriguez in 212 needs his dressing changed. Room 218 wants pain medication. Get moving." She walked away before I could respond. I stared at the vending machine for 5 more seconds, watching someone's quarters clink into the slot. They bought a candy bar and unwrapped it right there. The chocolate smell drifted over, making my stomach cramp with longing. I grabbed the supply cart and headed to room 212. 5 hours down, 13 to go. My vision blurred slightly at the edges. This was going to be a very long day. By hour 7, I was rationing saliva. My mouth felt like sandpaper, and my throat burned with every swallow. The water fountain beckoned from the end of the hall, but every time I started toward it, Beth materialized like a ghost. "Where are you going?" "Just to get some water." Mrs. Williams pressed her call button. "Handle it first." This happened 4 times. 4 times I walked toward hydration and got redirected to another task. It felt deliberate, calculated, like she was testing how far she could push me. During my 5th attempt, she cornered me by the supply closet. "You seem distracted today. Everything okay at home?" The question felt loaded, dangerous. "I'm just thirsty and hungry. I haven't had anything since yesterday dinner." She tapped her pen against her clipboard. "Maybe you should have thought about that before coming to work unprepared. The cafeteria's closed. You won't let me leave the floor. I won't let you abandon your patients." Her smile was razor thin. "That's very different." I wanted to scream that 30 seconds at a water fountain wasn't abandoning anyone. Instead, I nodded and returned to my rounds. My lips started to crack. Hour 9 brought a small miracle. Oliver from housekeeping slipped me a bottle of water when Beth wasn't looking. "You look terrible," he whispered. "Drink this in the supply closet." I almost cried with gratitude. The water tasted like heaven, and, for a moment, the fog in my brain cleared. But it was just 16 ounces against a massive deficit. my stomach still cramped with hunger and my hands still shook. "Better?" Oliver asked when I emerged. "You saved my life." I meant it. "That woman's insane. Everyone knows it." Before I could respond, Beth's voice echoed down the hall. "Anyone seen that water bottle? Someone left one in the supply closet." My blood turned to ice. Had she seen Oliver give it to me? Was she watching that closely? "Must have been a visitor," Oliver said smoothly. "I'll dispose of it." Beth's eyes narrowed, scanning both of us like a predator. "Make sure it doesn't happen again. We can't have random items cluttering our workspace." She walked away, and Oliver shook his head. "Document everything," he whispered. "This isn't normal." I started to ask what he meant, but Beth called my name from the nurse's station. The hunting wasn't over. Hour 11 marked the halfway point, though my body felt like it had been running for days. I leaned against the medication room door and pulled out my phone. My hands shook as I opened the voice memo app. Day 1, hour 11. Supervisor Beth Martinez has denied all requests for food or water breaks. Cafeteria closed, not allowed to leave floor. Received 1 bottle of water from housekeeping staff member Oliver. I paused, listening for footsteps. The hallway stayed quiet. Patient care becoming difficult due to physical symptoms, hands shaking, vision blurry, difficulty concentrating. This seems intentional. I saved the memo and tucked my phone away. Oliver's words echoed in my mind. Document everything. Something told me I'd need proof of this nightmare. There you are. Beth appeared around the corner like she'd been hunting me. Room 206 needs assistance, and we have a new admission coming up from emergency. Of course. I pushed off from the wall, fighting a wave of dizziness. You look pale. Feeling all right? The fake concern in her voice made my skin crawl. Just tired. Well, 9 hours to go. Pace yourself. She smiled and walked away, leaving me staring at her retreating form. 9 hours. I'd never make it at this rate. Hour 13 brought the worst moment yet. I was helping Mr. Patterson back to bed when my knees buckled. Just for a second, but enough to make him grab the bed rail in alarm. Nurse, are you okay? Fine, fine. I steadied myself, embarrassment burning my cheeks. Just lost my balance. But Beth had seen it from the doorway. She waited until Mr. Patterson was settled, then followed me into the hallway. That was concerning. I'm okay. Are you? Because if you're having medical issues, maybe you should go home. The trap snapped shut around me. If I admitted feeling sick, she'd send me home and probably write me up for leaving mid-shift. If I said I was fine, she'd keep denying me basic human needs. I'm fine. Just need a quick snack. There's no time for snacks. We have actual work to do. She walked away, leaving me swaying in the hallway. A nursing assistant named Kelly watched from the station, her face full of sympathy and anger. This is wrong, she mouthed. I nodded but kept walking. 5 hours left. 5 hours to survive this deliberate torture. My phone felt heavy in my pocket, full of the evidence I was slowly collecting. Hour 15 marked a turning point. Not because things got better, but because I stopped expecting them to. I moved through my tasks like a robot, conserving every ounce of energy. That's when I overheard Beth talking to the charge nurse from day shift. She's being dramatic about the food thing? Nurses used to work long shifts all the time without complaining. For 18 hours? Without eating? She should have brought something. Poor planning isn't my problem. I pressed myself against the wall outside the break room, recording their conversation on my phone. The charge nurse sounded increasingly uncomfortable. Beth, this seems extreme. Can't she just grab something from the gift shop? She needs to learn time management. This is a teaching moment. Teaching moment. Like I was a child being punished instead of a healthcare professional working to save lives. The recording stopped when my phone ran out of storage, but I'd heard enough. I created a new note in my phone. Hour 15. Overheard supervisor referring to food water denial as teaching moment. Recorded partial conversation. The documentation felt like armor. Whatever Beth thought she was teaching me, she was actually providing evidence for her own downfall. Hour 16 brought visitors to Mrs. Patterson's room, her daughter and son-in-law. Professional, well-dressed people who asked intelligent questions about their mother's care. Normal people from the normal world where humans ate food and drank water. You look exhausted, the daughter said kindly. When's your break? I glanced toward the nurse's station where Beth watched like a hawk. Oh, I'm fine. Just a long shift. How long? 18 hours. Their faces changed. The son-in-law, wearing a suit that screamed lawyer, frowned deeply. 18 hours straight? That doesn't seem safe. It's normal in healthcare, I lied. But he was already pulling out his phone. What's the name of your supervisor? Before I could answer, Beth appeared in the doorway. Is everything all right here? We were just asking about break schedules, the daughter said. 18 hours seems like a lot. Beth's smile could have frozen water. Our nurses are very dedicated. We make sure they have everything they need. I felt my face burn with the lie. The lawyer's son-in-law was typing notes into his phone, and Beth noticed. Her smile faltered slightly. If you'll excuse us, she said, we have other patients to attend to. Outside the room, she grabbed my arm. What did you tell them? Nothing. They asked about the shift length. Her grip tightened. Be more careful. Hour 17 felt like climbing a mountain in quicksand. Every step required tremendous effort, and I kept sliding backward. My vision tunneled, and I caught myself using the wall for support more often than I should. That's when Kelly pulled me into an empty room. I've been working here 5 years, she whispered. I've never seen anything like this. What she's doing is illegal. I know. You need to report her. With what proof? Kelly looked around, then pulled out her own phone. I've been documenting too. Timestamps of when you asked for breaks, her responses, everything. She showed me her notes, detailed, time-stamped observations that corroborated everything I'd experienced. Other people are watching too. We all see what's happening. Hope flickered in my chest. You'd testify to this? Absolutely. This is abuse. Before I could respond, Beth's voice echoed down the hall. Where is everyone? We have patients. Kelly squeezed my shoulder. 1 more hour, then we burn her world down. I managed a weak smile. 1 more hour felt impossible, but knowing I wasn't alone made it seem survivable. Barely. The documentation in my phone grew heavier with each note. Beth thought she was breaking me, but she was actually building my case. Hour 18 arrived like a finish line made of broken glass. I'd survived, technically, but everything hurt. My head pounded. My stomach felt like it was eating itself, and my hands couldn't stop shaking. Beth found me at the nurse's station, completing my final charts. Good shift, she said casually, like nothing had happened. Good shift? The words escaped before I could stop them. Problem? I looked around the station. Kelly watched from the supply room. Oliver lingered nearby with his cleaning cart. Other staff members had found reasons to be close by, an audience for whatever happened next. I haven't eaten or had water for 20 hours. That sounds like poor planning. You denied every request I made. I prioritized patient care, as should you. The casual cruelty of it broke something inside me. 20 hours of hunger, thirst, and humiliation, and she was proud of it. She thought she'd won. I pulled out my phone and opened my voice memos. 23 recordings from throughout the shift. I documented everything. Her face went white. You what? Every denial, every excuse, every lie. I stood up, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. I'm done. You can't just leave. Watch me. I grabbed my bag and walked toward the elevator, my legs shaking but carrying me forward. I sat in my car for 10 minutes before starting the engine. My hands trembled too badly to drive immediately, so I used the time to organize my thoughts and evidence. 23 voice recordings. Kelly's written observations. Oliver's witness statement, which he'd texted me before I left. The overheard conversation between Beth and the charge nurse. The lawyer's son-in-law's business card, which he'd slipped me on his way out. But most importantly, I had my own detailed account of 18 hours of systematic abuse. Not dramatic interpretation, just facts. Times, statements, witnesses, consequences. I finally started the car and drove home slowly, stopping at a drive-thru for the first food I'd had in over 20 hours. The burger tasted like victory and justice mixed together. At home, I opened my laptop and began typing. Incident report, systematic denial of basic human needs during 18-hour shift. I included everything, timestamps, quotes, witness information, physical symptoms, patient safety concerns. By the time I finished, the document was 12 pages long, comprehensive, detailed, damning. I saved it with the date and time, then began researching who to send it to: the state health department, the hospital's corporate compliance office, the nursing board, the labor department. Beth thought she'd taught me a lesson. She had, just not the one she intended. I slept for 14 hours and woke up feeling human again. My phone showed 17 missed calls from the hospital and 12 from Beth personally. I ignored them all and focused on my mission. First stop, the State Labor Department. I filed a formal complaint online, uploading all my evidence. The system generated a case number and promised an investigation within 30 days. Second stop, the hospital's corporate compliance hotline. I spoke to a very concerned representative who took detailed notes and promised to escalate the matter immediately. Third stop, the nursing board. They were particularly interested in the patient safety implications of forcing nurses to work 18 hours without food or water. Each call strengthened my case. Each person I spoke to expressed shock at what had happened. "This is highly unusual," they kept saying. "We take these matters very seriously." By afternoon, I felt confident I'd lit enough fires under the right people. But I wasn't done yet. I called the lawyer's son-in-law, whose business card identified him as a partner at a prominent firm specializing in employment law. "I remember you," he said immediately. "My mother-in-law couldn't stop talking about how exhausted you looked. She was worried. I'd like to discuss what happened that day. I'd like to hear about it. Can you come in tomorrow?" Game on. The law office was exactly what I'd expected. Marble floors, expensive art, the smell of success and justice. The lawyer, whose name was Benjamin Torres, listened to my story with growing anger. "She literally denied you water?" "Multiple times. I have it recorded." He played the audio files, his face darkening with each clip. When Beth's voice said professional nurses don't whine about being hungry, he actually cursed under his breath. "This is unbelievable. How are you feeling now?" "Angry, but determined." "Good. You should be angry." He leaned back in his chair. "I've handled workplace abuse cases for 15 years. This is among the worst I've seen." "What are my options?" "Several. We can file suit for workplace harassment, deliberate infliction of emotional distress, and violation of state labor laws. The evidence you collected is exceptional." He paused, studying me carefully. "But I want to warn you, this will get ugly. The hospital will claim you're a disgruntled employee making false accusations. They'll try to destroy your reputation." "Let them try. They'll investigate your entire work history, looking for any mistake or complaint." "I'm not worried." He smiled. "Good, because we're going to destroy them." We spent 2 hours going through my evidence, building a timeline, identifying witnesses. By the end, I felt like I had an army behind me. 3 days later, the hospital called. Not Beth, not my old supervisor, but the chief nursing officer herself. Her voice was carefully controlled, professionally neutral. "We're conducting an internal investigation into your allegations. We'd like you to come in for an interview. I've already filed my report with multiple agencies. We understand, but we want to hear your side directly." I almost laughed. Now they wanted to hear my side. After 18 hours of being ignored, dismissed, and abused, suddenly my voice mattered. "I'll come in, but my attorney will be present." Silence. Then, "That's your right, of course." We scheduled the meeting for the following Monday. I called Benjamin immediately to let him know. "They're scared," he said with satisfaction. "Internal investigations don't happen this fast unless someone very important is panicking." "What do you think they'll offer?" "Probably a settlement. They'll want this to disappear quietly." "I'm not interested in quiet." "I hoped you'd say that." The weekend dragged by slowly. I kept expecting to feel nervous about the confrontation, but instead I felt calm. Ready. I'd been preparing for this moment since hour 1 of that nightmare shift. Beth had thought she was teaching me about submission and compliance. Instead, she taught me about power and justice. Monday morning, I walked into Memorial Hospital for the first time since my resignation. The familiar smell of antiseptic and fear hit me immediately. But this time, I wasn't afraid. I had backup. Benjamin sat beside me in the conference room, his briefcase full of evidence and legal firepower. Across from us sat the chief nursing officer, the HR director, and the hospital's legal counsel. Beth was notably absent. "We appreciate you coming in," the CNO began. "We take these allegations very seriously." "I would hope so. Can you walk us through what happened on your last shift?" I did, methodically and thoroughly. I watched their faces change as I described each denial, each escalation, each deliberate cruelty. The HR director actually winced when I described nearly collapsing while helping a patient. "Do you have any evidence of these allegations?" the legal counsel asked. Benjamin smiled and opened his briefcase. "Extensive evidence." For the next hour, we played recordings, showed photographs, and presented witness statements. By the end, the room was deadly quiet. "We'll need to investigate further," the CNO said finally. "Of course," Benjamin replied. "In the meantime, we'll be filing formal charges with the State Labor Board and pursuing civil remedies." The hospital's lawyer paled. "Perhaps we can resolve this internally." "Too late for that," I said. "You had 18 hours to resolve it internally." 2 weeks later, Kelly called with updates from inside the hospital. "Beth's been suspended pending investigation. Everyone's talking about it." "How's morale?" "Better. People feel like they can speak up now. 3 other nurses have filed complaints about her." That was the beginning of the avalanche. Once word spread that someone had successfully challenged Beth's tyranny, others found their courage. The complaints painted a picture of systematic abuse spanning years. Denial of breaks, forcing nurses to work while sick, retaliating against anyone who questioned her methods, creating unsafe working conditions through deliberate understaffing. "There's more," Kelly continued. "Administration found out she was falsifying break records, claiming nurses took breaks they never actually got." My jaw dropped. "That's fraud." "Gets better. She was also billing the hospital for overtime hours she never worked herself, while forcing everyone else to work unpaid overtime. The corruption ran deeper than I'd imagined. Beth hadn't just been a cruel supervisor, she'd been a criminal." Benjamin was ecstatic when I told him. "This changes everything. We're not just looking at workplace harassment anymore. This is criminal fraud affecting patient safety." The case was becoming bigger than my personal experience. It was about every nurse who'd ever been denied basic human needs in the name of dedication. A month after my resignation, the State Labor Department completed their investigation. The report was devastating. 12 violations of state labor law, systematic denial of mandated breaks, creation of unsafe working conditions, and falsification of records. The hospital was fined $50,000 and ordered to implement new policies for break schedules and supervisor oversight. But the real victory was the criminal referral. Beth Martinez was arrested on charges of fraud and endangering public safety. The local news picked up the story. Hospital supervisor arrested for abusing staff, falsifying records. I watched the coverage from my living room, eating actual food and drinking actual water whenever I wanted. The reporter interviewed other nurses who'd worked under Beth, and their stories were horrifyingly similar to mine. "She thought she was untouchable," one nurse said. "Nobody ever challenged her before." That phrase stuck with me. Nobody ever challenged her before. How many nurses had suffered through 18-hour shifts without food or water? How many had nearly collapsed while providing patient care? How many had quit rather than endure her abuse? My phone rang. It was the reporter from the news station. "Would you be willing to do an interview? You're the nurse who filed the original complaint." I looked at Benjamin, who nodded encouragingly. "Yes," I said. "I think people need to hear this story." The interview aired on the evening news 2 days later. I sat in the studio, calm and professional, telling my story to thousands of viewers. I didn't dramatize or exaggerate. I didn't need to. The facts were shocking enough. For 18 hours, I was denied food and water while caring for critically ill patients. When I nearly collapsed, my supervisor called it a teaching moment. The anchor looked genuinely appalled. "What drove you to document everything?" "Someone told me to document everything, and I'm glad I listened. Without evidence, it would have been my word against hers." What would you tell other healthcare workers facing similar situations? Document everything, report everything. Don't suffer in silence thinking it's normal or necessary. It's not. The story went viral locally, then nationally. Healthcare workers from across the country shared their own stories of abuse and exploitation. The hashtag #DocumentEverything began trending on social media. I received hundreds of messages from nurses thanking me for speaking up. Many shared their own experiences with abusive supervisors who used dedication and patient care as weapons against their own staff. The conversation was changing. The assumption that healthcare workers should endure any abuse in the name of service was being challenged. Beth's world was crumbling, but something better was being built from the ruins. 3 months after my resignation, I started a new job at a different hospital across town. The interview process had been refreshingly different. "We have mandatory break policies," the nurse manager explained. "If anyone tries to prevent you from taking your scheduled break, you report it immediately to administration." What about during emergencies? Emergencies are different, obviously. But systematic denial of breaks isn't tolerated here. We've learned from other hospitals' mistakes. She was referring to the changes sweeping through healthcare after my story went public. Hospitals across the state were revising their policies, training supervisors, and creating anonymous reporting systems for workplace abuse. My first day was surreal. At exactly noon, my supervisor said, "Time for your lunch break. The cafeteria has good soup today." I almost cried. Such a simple thing, being told to take care of myself while taking care of others. It should have been normal all along. During my break, I sat in the sunny cafeteria eating actual food and checking my phone. Benjamin had texted an update. "Beth pled guilty to fraud charges. Sentence hearing next month." I typed back, "Good. Justice served." But the real justice wasn't Beth's punishment. It was sitting in that cafeteria, eating lunch, knowing that other nurses across the country were doing the same thing because someone had finally said, enough. 6 months later, I received an unexpected invitation. The State Nursing Association wanted to present me with an award for advocacy and patient safety. The irony wasn't lost on me, being honored for patient safety by refusing to accept unsafe working conditions. The ceremony was at a hotel ballroom filled with nurses, administrators, and healthcare advocates. I wore a simple dress and tried not to feel overwhelmed by the attention. "Your courage to document and report workplace abuse has changed how we think about healthcare working conditions," the association president said during the presentation. "You've made every nurse's job safer." The standing ovation was overwhelming. Hundreds of healthcare workers on their feet, applauding not just me, but the principle I represented, that caring for patients shouldn't require destroying ourselves. During the reception afterward, I was approached by a young nurse who looked nervous. "I wanted to thank you," she said quietly. "My supervisor used to deny breaks all the time. After your story came out, our hospital changed its policies completely. I actually get to eat lunch now." That conversation meant more than any award. Real change in real people's lives. That was the point of everything I'd endured. Kelly approached with a group of nurses from Memorial. "How's the new job?" "They feed me regularly. It's revolutionary." We laughed, but there was truth in the joke. Basic human dignity shouldn't be revolutionary in healthcare. But somehow it had been. A year later, I was invited to testify before the state legislature about proposed workplace protection laws for healthcare workers. The committee room was packed with nurses, hospital administrators, and union representatives. "Describe the conditions you experienced," the committee chair requested. I told the story again, but this time to lawmakers who could change things systematically. I described the 18 hours without food or water, the deliberate denial of basic needs, the culture of exploitation disguised as dedication. What would have prevented this situation? Clear policies with real enforcement, anonymous reporting systems, protection from retaliation, and understanding that exhausted, dehydrated healthcare workers aren't heroes, they're patients waiting to happen. The proposed law passed unanimously. It mandated minimum staffing ratios, protected meal breaks, and created state oversight of healthcare workplace conditions. It was nicknamed Lena's Law after me, though I preferred to think of it as common sense, finally becoming law. Beth's legacy was creating the conditions that led to systemic reform. She tried to break one nurse and ended up breaking an entire system of abuse. The new law would protect thousands of healthcare workers from experiencing what I'd endured. That transformation felt like the real victory. 2 years after my resignation, I was promoted to charge nurse at my new hospital. My first priority was creating a culture where basic human needs weren't seen as luxuries or weaknesses. I instituted protected break times, hired adequate staff, and most importantly, made it clear that patient care and staff care weren't competing priorities. They were inseparable. Hungry nurses make mistakes, I told my team during orientation. Dehydrated nurses pass out. Exhausted nurses can't think clearly. Taking care of yourselves is taking care of your patients. The concept seemed radical to some nurses who'd been conditioned to accept abuse as normal. But gradually the culture changed. People started eating lunch. They stayed hydrated. They took sick days when they were actually sick. Our patient satisfaction scores were the highest in the hospital. Our error rates were the lowest. Staff turnover was virtually zero. Turns out, treating people like humans improved everything. I kept a photo on my desk from the Nursing Association award ceremony, not because I needed recognition, but as a reminder that individual courage could create collective change. My phone buzzed with a text from Kelly. Beth got out of prison today, 18 months served. I stared at the message for a moment, then deleted it. Beth's story was over. Mine was just beginning. 3 years after that nightmare shift, I received a call from a nurse in another state. She'd found my contact information through the Nursing Association and wanted advice about her own abusive supervisor. She makes us work 16-hour shifts without breaks. She says it builds character. Document everything, I told her. Every denial, every excuse, every threat, record conversations if your state allows it. Get witness statements. Build an unshakable case. I'm scared of retaliation. I understand, but the only way to stop a bully is to fight back with facts and evidence. They can't argue with timestamps and recordings. I walked her through the process I'd used, the labor board complaint, the internal investigation, the legal action. She took detailed notes and promised to start documenting immediately. A month later, she called back. She's been suspended pending investigation. 3 other nurses came forward with similar stories. We're all giving statements to the state. Another domino falling. Another abusive supervisor being held accountable. Another workplace being forced to change. The conversation ended, and I sat in my office thinking about the ripple effects of that single 18-hour shift. One nurse's decision to document and report had created waves of change across the entire healthcare system. Beth Martinez had thought she was teaching me about submission. Instead, she'd taught thousands of healthcare workers about resistance. 5 years later, I spoke at a national healthcare conference about workplace conditions and patient safety. The audience was thousands of nurses, doctors, administrators, and policymakers from across the country. 5 years ago, I worked 18 hours without food or water because my supervisor thought it would teach me dedication, I began. Today, that same behavior would trigger automatic state investigation under laws that exist because we stopped accepting abuse as normal. The applause was thunderous. The changes had been dramatic. Mandatory break protections, whistleblower protections, minimum staffing requirements, and cultural shifts toward treating healthcare workers as humans rather than martyrs. After my speech, a young nurse approached me. I'm graduating next month. My professors told us about your case in our workplace rights class. They said you changed everything. We changed everything, I corrected. Every nurse who reported abuse, every administrator who implemented better policies, every lawmaker who voted for protection, we all changed it together. That evening, I sat in my hotel room reflecting on the journey. From that nightmare shift to national recognition, from systematic abuse to systematic reform. I pulled out my phone and recorded one final voice memo. 5 years later, the system that tried to break me is broken instead. The supervisor who denied my humanity is forgotten. The culture that accepted abuse has been replaced by one that demands dignity. Sometimes the best revenge isn't personal. It's institutional change that protects everyone who comes after you. I saved the recording and smiled. Beth had taught me that documentation was power. She just hadn't realized I'd use that power to build something better than the world she tried to create.